Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story carved from silence and shadow and experience Elias Monroe could never explain, even if he remembered how it ended. He arrived at a forgotten castle in the woods, expecting to study language. Instead, he found something waiting beneath the stone, something that listened. So settle and let the darkness settle around you, and hear what was never meant to be spoken. I don't recall the flight, I don't recall the train. I only remember the castle. One moment, I was boarding a night train from Prague with a lukewarm cup of coffee and a satchel of unread transcripts. The next, I stood before a black wall of stone that seemed to exhale frost and silence. Hauska, it rose out of the forest like a burial mound carved into geometry. Its turrets, not so much built as grown from the bedrock like ossified horns. There were no signs, no roads led here, and yet I had come as if summoned. My name is Dr. Elias Monroe, forensic linguist, former professor at Columbia. I specialize in dead languages, especially those no one remembers dying. Governments hire me, and documents surface that resist translation. When codes break translators, I get the call. Last spring, I received a package. No return address, just a yellowed envelope, and a name I hadn't heard in 20 years, Thomas. The contents were worse. Pages of a language I shouldn't have recognized, except I did. I'd seen it once before, in a dream I had as a boy after my mother hanged herself. A spiraling script written in something darker than ink, something that pulsed. I told myself I was investigating a fraud, but the moment I passed under Hauska's archway, my ears rang and the ground shifted beneath me. Like the earth exhaled relieved, I'd finally come home. That was 17 days ago. I'm writing this from beneath the castle. There is no sky here, only the pit. It watches. It started with the smell, not the sour rot of old stone or the mildew of damp halls, but something older, a tang of iron and smoke, like blood steaming on cold soil. I smelled it the moment the castle doors opened, creaking outward like a jaw unhinging. Carol greeted me. "You made it," he said, eyes too white, smile too fixed. His English was smooth, practiced, like a man who rehearses every phrase. We were beginning to worry. I didn't ask who he was. I was the only one here, wasn't I? Carol wore a wool coat too large for him, with brass buttons that looked more ornamental than functional. He extended a hand. It was cold and dry, like paper stretched too tight over knuckles. "The documents?" I asked, not wasting time. He motioned for me to follow. The doors swung shut behind me without a touch. "Upstairs," he said, "but not tonight. You've come a long way. The castle doesn't like visitors to work on empty stomachs." The entrance hall was a coffin stone, quiet, dust-choked, sealed from light. Crosses hung on every wall, nailed upside down. I assumed vandalism, but they were ancient, with so dry it looked fossilized. Carol led me through a corridor lined with animal skulls. Goat, deer, dog, some I didn't recognize. Their sockets followed us, even when I turned. "This was once a hunting lodge," he said, "then a chapel, then a prison. Now," he chuckled, "now it's waiting." I stopped. Waiting for what? He didn't answer. My room was near the west wing. Oh, Carol never called it that. He called it the quiet side. It was simple. Bed, desk, a single window that faced nothing but stone. I'd asked for a room with a view of the woods. He apologized. said it wasn't permitted, I didn't press. I unpacked laptop, audio recorder, my journal, 3 books on Slavic iconography, 1 gun. The manuscript pages were in my bag, carefully wrapped. I hadn't opened them since the night I received them. I thought about doing so now, but stopped when I noticed something strange. The crucifix on the wall above my bed had been turned backward. Carved symbols covered the rear scratches I hadn't noticed at first glance. I reached for it, but my hand stopped just short of touching. It felt warm, like skin. That night I dreamed of tunnels. I was walking barefoot on stone slick with something viscous. The walls were flesh. They pulsed with breath. The sound echoed ahead like a voice underwater, calling my name in reverse. I turned, but there was no path back. Only forward. I woke with my heart pounding. There were no lights in the room. My phone had powered down. The crucifix had fallen from the wall. It lay face up on the floor, the carved symbols burning faintly red in the dark. A new smell had filled the air, coal smoke, and something wet, like fresh-turned soil. I opened the door. The corridor beyond was not the one I had come through. It sloped down. I should have gone back to bed. I should have chalked it all up to jet lag, nerves, sleep inertia, any of the rational excuses people use when reality begins to falter at the edges. But the slope of the corridor, the angle was wrong. Not steep, but enough that walking forward felt like being pulled not by gravity, but by intention. The air changed. Heavier, damp, like something breathing just ahead. I took 3 steps down before I realized the walls were bare stone. No sconces, no wiring, just ancient blocks, pitted and veined with lichen. I hadn't noticed moss inside a building before. A sound echoed, not footsteps, not wind. It was softer, rhythmic, dripping. Water, I told myself. Condensation, old castles leak. But it was too steady. To precise, I stopped. The air behind me had gone still, not silent still. Even my own breathing felt muffled, like the space itself was swallowing sound. I turned to go back. No door, no corridor, just stone stretching on behind me, exactly like the stone ahead. My pulse thudded in my ears, and then a voice, not words, just the shape of speech, close enough to sound like it came from a mouth, but wrong in ways I couldn't place, wet, gargling vowels. Something croaked in the back of a throat too long to be human. I ran. At the first intersection, I turned hard right and collided into someone. A scream lodged in my throat, but the figure caught me, steadied me. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. She was real, solid, warm, human, female, mid-30s, British accent. She wore hiking boots and a thermal jacket dusted with mildew, a notepad tucked under one arm. Her flashlight flicked nervously around the hall. I nodded to fast. Dr. Elias Monroe, forensic linguist. I stopped myself. "Who are you?" "Amara Patel," she said. "Folklore and material culture. I'm with Cambridge." Sort of. She hesitated. "Officially, I'm here cataloging the artifacts in the chapel. Unofficially, I was sent to figure out why researchers keep disappearing." That snapped the last of the fog from my mind. Disappearing. She gave me a hard look. "Carol didn't tell you. Carol told me to get some rest." She almost laughed. classic. We walked together back to my room, or what she insisted was my room. The corridor was different now, lit by flickering bulbs encased in rusty cages, the slope gone, but the crucifix was still on the floor, symbols carved into its back. Amara didn't react. You see them too? I asked. She crouched. I see them. I've been sketching them for days. They change. She tapped her notepad. I leaned closer. Pages filled with hand-drawn symbols, all slight variations. Twists of spirals, loops embedded within loops. Familiar, too familiar. What language do you think it is? She asked. It's not a language, I said, before realizing I had no basis for the statement. It's something else. She looked up at me. That's what the last guy said before he walked into the woods barefoot and never came back. Later that night, I recorded the symbols. I don't know why. Compulsion, instinct, a kind of dread I didn't want to admit was growing in me. I used my old reel recorder, the one I trust more than digital, analog, dependable, safe. I spoke slowly, carefully. Symbol 1 resembles an Ouroboros, but inward-facing, feels compressed, uncomfortable in the mind. Symbol 2, like a spoked wheel, but the spokes twist in inconsistent directions. Movement imply. I paused. Something clattered outside my door. The recorder ticked softly, then picked up something else. A whisper. I rewound it. Nothing on playback, just my voice. Then, very faint, right at the edge of the reel, a sound that should not exist. You came back. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair by the window, which still faced only stone, and watched nothing. In the pre-dawn dark, I smelled smoke again. Wet ash, like a fire buried under damp earth, and underneath that, something familiar, something buried deep in memory, the scent of burnt rope, like the kind that leaves marks on rafters, like the kind they used in the barn where my mother. The castle shifts when you're not looking. That's what I'm beginning to think. It isn't just old stone. It wants, it remembers, and it brought me here for a reason that smells like ash and blood, and the last words my mother ever wrote. It came through the hole. I lost 6 hours. The clock on my recorder said to 13 a.m. when I finished speaking into it. The sun was high when I blinked again. Midday, full light through a slit in the ceiling I hadn't noticed before, a skylight in a room with no windows, a room that shouldn't exist. I was no longer in my quarters. The crucifix was gone. Instead, a mural stretched across the far wall, charred, defaced. Faded shapes knotted into each other. Men with animal heads, trees bearing eyes, a woman in a noose giving birth to something faceless. I touched it, hoping it was a dream. It was warm, not from sunlight, from within the wall. The door behind me had no handle, no hinges, just a wooden slab with a perfectly round hole bored in the center. Not large, about the size of a coin, just wide enough to glimpse the dark beyond. I peered through it. Nothing. Then movement. A flutter, like wings, a smear of red light. The echo of footsteps, not mine. I recoiled. The door opened on its own. A long corridor, narrow, low ceiling, walls streaked with soot, or something darker. No torches, no electric light. Yet I saw clearly. Down the hall stood Amara, facing away, still. Amara. My voice came out small, brittle. She didn't answer. I took a step forward. She turned her head, not fully, just enough that I saw her profile. Her mouth moved, but no sound reached me. Then she split, her body twitched, as though something inside pulled free from her skin. Her eyes rolled white, her arms jerked like a marionette, and she walked straight into the wall and vanished. I ran, not away, toward. I had to know the wall was solid, cold, slick with condensation or sweat. I slammed my fist against it. Nothing, no illusion, no trick, just stone. When I turned, the hallway had grown shorter, then shorter again, and then I was back in my room. Amara was pacing. "You've been gone since dawn," she snapped. I knocked, waited, even asked, "Carol?" "I didn't leave," I said. She stopped. "I watched your door all night. I woke up somewhere else, a room with a mural, a corridor. You were there." Her face went still. Then she said something that didn't fit the air. "Was there a hole in the door?" I froze. "Yes." She sat. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "There's a part of the castle that doesn't exist on paper. Locals call it the Slepperdom, the blind house. No doors, no stairs, no floor plans. Every few years, someone finds it. No one finds it twice. Why not? Because the second time they don't come back." We went to the archive room that afternoon, a dust-choked library cram with fragile documents, maps, and photos. The castle's so-called official history had more redactions than facts. Carol claimed the area was sealed for renovation. He lied. The files were in no order, but I'm good at patterns. It's what I do. It took an hour before I found it. A surveyor's sketch from 1976, a section of the western wall labeled as 12-quarter discontinued, undocumented access point, archway walled in. Below it, a note: "Do not open without auditory suppression. Whispering persists after contact." Amara found something else. A photograph, black and white, faded nearly white from age. 5 men in coats standing before what looked like a mine shaft. A 6th man kneeling, head covered in a sack. 2 soldiers held ropes. One held a crucifix. Below the photo, scribbled in pencil, "Test 3, it spoke his name." Blood came from the ears. That night, I heard it again, the dripping. Only this time, it wasn't in the hall, it was in the walls. A steady beat, like a metronome, then it changed. The rhythm staggered, doubled, tripled, became language. I pressed my ear to the stone. "You are inside now." I fell back, and the crucifix, the one that had vanished, was now nailed to the floor, nails through the limbs. Blood, not rust, dripped from its base. My ears rang, my nose bled. And in that moment, I remembered something from years ago, an old journal my mother kept, hidden behind loose boards in our Nebraska farmhouse. It described a dream she had in 1979, a door in a castle that could only be opened with silence, a voice in a hallway that knew her father's name, a hole in the world where light refused to go. I had chalked it up to madness, but now I think she had been here, or something from here had found her in the cold light of morning. Amara brought me a tray with stale bread and boiled eggs. Her hands shook slightly, but she didn't speak of the crucifix nailed to my floor or the blood. Neither did I. Some truths hang between people like smoke, visible, inescapable, but never acknowledged aloud. Instead, she opened her notebook and pointed to a series of overlapping sketches. "The mural," she said. "You described it. I've seen fragments of it before." "Where?" I asked. "Under layers of plaster in the eastern crypts." Same figures, woman in the noose, trees with eyes. But there's a part you didn't mention, probably not visible in your room. I think you were only seeing one panel. I leaned closer. Her last drawing chilled me. It showed the same woman, still hanging, but this time her eyes were open, and beneath her, a pit. Not a symbolic chasm, a literal depiction, rendered in ochre and soot. Figures circled the opening, hands outstretched, as if worshipping it or dragging something out. In the center of the pit, a shape, blurred, tentative. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "I think," I said slowly, "it's something people used to feed." We decided to go to the crypts. Carol was conspicuously absent that day, but the old woman who tended the herb garden watched us, with eyes to clear for her years. When we passed, she muttered something in Czech. I caught one word. Karini Roots, Amara translated, or ... origins. I stopped. She's saying the thing isn't buried. It grew here. We descended with flashlights and dust masks. The crypts were unsealed in the 1980s. Carol had said, after a gas incident killed 2 maintenance workers. That lie, too, collapsed under closer scrutiny. The air was clean, bone dry. There was no evidence of combustion, but there were marks on the walls, not carvings, furrows, like fingers dragged down stone in desperation. We found the mural behind the third alcove. Amara scraped away the plaster slowly. The air changed with each chip of stone, a rising pressure, like something long submerged, beginning to stir. The full mural was much larger than I expected, floor to ceiling. The figures danced in impossible poses, their limbs elongated and mouths twisted into spirals. The woman, the pit, the watchers, beneath them a string of symbols. I felt a low vibration in my jaw the moment I saw them. Same characters as the manuscript, but this time I could read one. A single glyph repeated, then a ring around the pit. ZHA Vital, not a name. A command open. Later, in the archive room, Amara uncovered an old map of the castle grounds from 1891. Buried in the legend was a curious notation. Ritual chamber sealed by Bishop Clement. Entrance erased. There was no clear location, but a rough sketch indicated it lay beneath the central courtyard. We checked it the next morning. After the snow melted enough to expose the paving stones, that's when we found it. A flat stone, slightly off color from the others. Faint grooves marked its edge. A sigil etched deep, almost worn away, same spiral motif from the mural. We brought tools, crowbars, shovels. We lifted the stone, and there, beneath it, a metal hatch covered in bone dust. It took both of us to lift it. A gust of hot air hit our faces, foul, wet, tinged with old blood. Beneath the hatch, a ladder led down into darkness, not just absence of light, but something greedy. The pit breathed. I felt it in my lungs. My pulse slowed. My vision swam. Amara clutched her chest. "It's whispering," she said, "not in sound and ... pressure. I hear it too." We didn't descend that day. We weren't ready, but we marked the hatch, covered it, hid it from Carol ... That night, I read the manuscript again. I saw something I hadn't before, a phrase in the margin cramped, almost illegible. She fed it memory. That was the offering. Sleep came reluctantly. The nightmare returned. But this time I wasn't just walking through the tunnels. I was watching myself from behind. My body moved without me. arms slack, mouth open, eyes wide. I entered the mural. The figures turned to face me. Their mouths opened and opened and opened, and then the woman in the noose leaned forward. She whispered something into my ear. "You were born here, Elias. You never left." I woke screaming. The crucifix on my wall had changed again. This time it wasn't upside down. This time it wasn't there at all. Instead, etched into the plaster in raw gouges, ZHA Vital, ZHA Vital, ZHA Vital, and below it, a drawing in blood, a ladder, leading down ... We descended before dawn. No ceremony, no words, just the cold hiss of breath and the quiet metallic clang of boots on iron rungs. I carried a headlamp and a flashlight, but the deeper we went, the less light seemed to matter. The darkness wasn't passive, it drank. The ladder groaned beneath us, rust flaked off like ash. The shaft felt older than the stone above, like it had been carved by something that didn't need hands. Amara whispered above me, voice dry with dread. "You feel it, yes. What does it feel like?" "Pressure," I said, "but not on my skin, in my head." And deeper, a shape, and that pressure, a presence. The chamber at the bottom was round, vast, lined with wet black stone that shimmered like obsidian. Symbols covered every surface, etched into the walls, hanging from chains, carved into the bone-white floor tiles. They pulsed, not literally, but somehow perceptibly. Each glyph beat like a second heart in the room. The air was thick with mold and copper, and something like incense that had rotted in its censer. In the center, a pedestal. On it, a book, bound in cracked leather, bloated with age and damp. A single chain ran through its spine and into the floor, as if someone once tried to keep it here. I moved closer. The text was in the same unknown script, but my eyes didn't resist this time. They slid into the shapes like keys into locks. I understood it. It wasn't written for me. It was written from me. The book contained testimonies, not stories, confessions. We gave it the child with the cleft mouth. The words opened the dream, and the dream fed the voice. It showed me my own death until I forgot how to speak in the present. The author was unnamed, but his voice was unmistakable, clinical, fluent, terrified. He wrote about a ritual from 1936, conducted by a group calling themselves the Circle of the First Kia, forgotten esoteric branch of the Czech occult revival. They believed words could undo reality, not symbols, not spells, syntax, structure, grammar as a spell. They had found a language in Hauska's walls, not spoken, but stored, and built a new dialect from its pieces. A verbal cipher designed to awaken the buried architect. They called it the deep speech. Amara found a photograph pressed between the pages. 8 men, faces blurred from damage or intentional smearing. They stood around a figure lying in a chalk circle. A woman, barefoot, arms flayed open, palms carved with glyphs. Her face was not obscured. It was my mother. Not as I remembered her, but younger. The same high cheekbones, same downturned eyes. She couldn't have been older than 20. This photo's from the 1930s. Amara whispered, impossible. But there it was, same woman, same face, same birthmark under the eye. Beneath the image, a caption scrawled in faded ink. The archivist. She who bears the script in the womb. We sat on the cold floor. I shook, not from cold, from the realization forming like frost in my thoughts. My mother wasn't insane. The dreams, the voices, the suicide, she was made for this, and so was I. We need to get out of here, Amara said, but the ladder was gone. We stared at the shaft. It hadn't collapsed. It hadn't crumbled. It had been sealed. The iron rungs were sheared off, smooth stone above, like the tunnel had never been there. I didn't panic. Not right away. I opened my notebook, began sketching the glyphs I could remember from the mural, from the manuscript, from my dreams. Amara paced. I focused on a single symbol that repeated in all sources, an asymmetrical spiral, offset with crosshatch marks. I'd seen it in the margins of my mother's journal, and in the scar on my shoulder I had always thought was a childhood injury. Amara spoke, voice hoarse. That marks on the back of my neck. I looked at her. She peeled away her scarf. There it was, the same glyph burned into her skin. The chamber lit suddenly, not with fire, not electricity, with remembrance. The glyphs along the walls glowed faintly. A new door etched itself into the stone ahead, not opening, but becoming visible. Amara stepped back. We didn't do that. Yes, I said, we did, by speaking. No, by remembering. She looked at me like I was no longer just Elias. And maybe I wasn't. We walked through the door. The corridor beyond wasn't made of stone. It was made of bone, not metaphorical, bone, stacked ribs, vertebrae, skull fragments, too many to be human, not quite animal. Each piece fused into the next like mortar made from the dead. The walls whispered as we passed, not in fear and hunger. They say language is what separates us from beasts. But deep in the bone corridor, I began to suspect that language is what feeds the beast. The walls echoed with snatches of sentences not spoken aloud, but breathed into thought. They weren't words we recognized, but meanings slipped into our minds like memory, and worse. They weren't from us. They were ours, yes, but from other versions of me, of Amara, words we'd never spoken, but could feel the shape of, crawling behind our teeth. The first hallucination hit, just past the second curve of the bone tunnel. The light shifted, not brighter, but thinner, like watching dawn through a blood-stained curtain. Amara gasped. I turned. She wasn't there. In her place stood a man, tall, military posture. Desert fatigues faded to gray. His face was one I had only seen once in a classified photo buried in a file I wasn't supposed to read. My father, but he died in Panama, 1989, shot through the neck. Buried, closed casket. I never saw the body. He opened his mouth. It's not death, Elias. It's the remembering that kills you. Then he collapsed into ash, leaving behind a sound like wet paper tearing. Behind me, Amara screamed. I ran back. She was on the floor, curled up, eyes wide, whispering a name. I leaned in. She said my name over and over. Not Elias, but the other name, the one the manuscript used, the one I didn't tell her, Javdal. Each time she said it, her breath frosted. The flow around her blackened, like rot blooming through marble. I grabbed her shoulders. Wake up. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't recognize me at first. Then she gasped. You were gone. You were a shadow. I couldn't remember your face. We moved faster after that. The corridor stretched, breathed, bent. Time grew elastic. My watch said 3:17 p.m. for hours. My hunger vanished, but thirst bloomed in my throat like cotton. The walls wept brine. Then a chamber opened, unlike the one above. This was clean and marked white stone, precisely cut. A single chair in the center, facing a stone slab. On the slab, a reel-to-reel recorder, old, Russian-made, still running. I pressed play, static, ... Then a woman's voice, hoarse, familiar. "My mother, I made it past the gate," she said. It took the others, I said the words. It opened the archive, I saw the memories. They are not mine, but I carry them now. A pause, breathing. They think remembering is passive, but remembering is creating, and they feed on creation. I was never the first, and I will not be the last. Elias, if you hear this, burn the words, or the pit will open again. Click. Silence. Then her voice changed. Not hoarse, not human. Do not obey her. Her memory is false. She dreamed rebellion. You are the archive now. The recorder burst into flame. Amara screamed again, this time not in fear, but pain. A high animal sound. I turned. Her arms glowed faint, glyphs surfacing under the skin like bruises pressed from within. The spiral, the cross, the split triangle. She's writing on me. Amara sobbed. No, I said. She's using you to write me. I turned to the walls, and I spoke the only phrase I knew wasn't mine, but still felt like it belonged to me. Zha elna senath. Cadel, Yai morth. The walls shook. Not violently, not like collapse, like recognition, and they opened. Behind the slab, behind the bone, behind the dream, a spiral staircase, carved from the same pale stone as the teeth of the dead. It wound downward into a pit of absolute dark. No light, no sound, just waiting. I looked at Amara. She was bleeding from the nose, eyes bloodshot, but standing. She nodded. ... We descended. Each step was a memory, not ours. The first, a Dust Bowl farmer kneeling before a well that breathed and called his son's name. The second, a 19th century nun whispering into a confession booth that had no priest, only a mirror. The third, my mother screaming in Czech, hands bound, eyes rolled back as the glyphs bled from her mouth. Each vision filled the air like smoke, tangible, inescapable. The stairs led us through history, not just time, but remembrance. And with each level, I could feel it drawing near. The center, the pit, the archive, not a place, not a being, but something older, the first listener. The one who hears thought and feeds on meaning. The one who came through when the first lie was spoken. At the final step, the spiral opened into a perfect circle. No walls, no ceiling. Just a floor and a vast black sphere hovering silently, pulsing like a heart held between worlds. And within it I saw it. The moment I was born, not in the hospital, but beneath a ruined chapel, wrapped in burlap. Glyphs sewn into my swaddling, a woman whispered a name not mine, and the darkness answered. There is no true silence, not even here, at the center of the world's forgetting. The sphere did not speak, it listened. I could feel its pull, not physical, not gravitational, but cognitive. Thought slid from my skull toward it like filings to a magnet. Names, faces, smells from childhood. Colors I hadn't remembered they existed. Moments I hadn't told even myself. Behind me, Amara retched, blood from her ears. She tried to speak, but her mouth was filled with symbols. Actual glyphs, pale shapes, writhing like worms, coiled on her tongue, etched into her teeth. She opened her mouth, and they fell, one by one, onto the stone. The sphere pulsed, It was feeding. A voice rose in my head, not sound, not vision, intention, like a stone drop into a still mind, rippling outward. To remain, you must be named. A pause. To speak your name, you must recall it. To recall it, you must survive yourself. And then the world vanished. I was standing in a farmhouse, dust on the windows, the smell of oats and ash and scorched hair. My mother stood at the sink, humming. Only this wasn't a memory. This was a lie dressed in memory's skin. I turned, the wallpaper rippled. The floor breathed. The crucifix on the wall blinked. This version of her smiled, but her teeth were wrong. Do you remember what I said, Elias? She asked, voice to calm. I backed away. Do you remember what I did for you? Her face split, not torn, just separated, like pages in a book. Beneath was another face, mouth sewn shut, eyes black. She walked toward me. You are not your memories. You are what watches them burn. The house collapsed inward. I stood alone in a hallway, all white, endless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Photographs lined the walls, each one of me dot at different ages, in different clothes, in places I've never been. In one photo, I'm shaking hands with a man with no face. In another, I'm standing in front of a chalk circle, holding a scalpel. Each image had a date. None of them matched my life. And the last one, I'm lying on the floor of this very chamber. Eyes open, no pupils, mouth agape dot, a caption beneath it. The moment he forgot, I collapsed. Not physically, cognitively. The language I thought and began to shatter. Sentences ran backward. Time looped. I saw myself asking questions I hadn't yet heard the answers to. The walls vibrated with phrases. She dreamed in grammar. He was remembered into being. The archive has no beginning, only edits. I crawled toward the center. The sphere loomed no longer black, but filled with a rolling film strip of memory fragments. Some mine, some not, all spinning. I spoke. I am Elias Monroe. The sphere didn't react. I spoke again. My name is Elias Monroe. I was born in 1982. My mother. The floor split, and I fell into myself. I landed in a stone cell. No windows, only a desk. On it, a document. Subject file 39B. Monroe, he typed. Official stamped. Redacted. I flipped through the pages. No birthplace, no records of education. No military history, only transcripts. Interview after interview. They'd been watching me since childhood. A passage circled and read. Subject exhibits spontaneous pattern recognition, consistent with survivors of deep linguistic contact, DLC. Suggests prior exposure via maternal line. Recommend containment and iterative dream mapping. Below that, if resistance to memory loop preaches critical phase, archive integration may occur autonomously. Integration. I wasn't here to investigate the archive. I was meant to become part of it. When I awoke, I was back in the chamber. Amara stood over me, eyes dull, mouth closed. She whispered, "You passed." Her voice wasn't hers. It was mine. I sat up. The sphere was gone. The room was now filled with mirrors. Each one reflected not me but possibilities. In one, I was still a professor, unscarred. In another, I was hanging from a noose inside Hausga. In another still I was the archivist, eyes hollow, hands black with ink that moved on its own. Amra's reflection didn't appear in any of them. I turned. She was gone, the chamber whispered, "Now we write," and the floor opened, revealing the stairs down. Still further down, there is always deeper. Always beneath I descended, not because I wanted to, not because I believed I could leave. I went down because the language inside me demanded it. Each step felt like walking through glue. The air thickened. Gravity changed shape, not heavier, but angled, like I was walking across the inside of a bowl. Somewhere above me, the mirrors still turned. Somewhere above, versions of me still failed. But this version was the one the archive chose to remember. At the base of the stair, the world changed again. Not a chamber this time, a grove, a forest underground, lit from nowhere, with trees that had no leaves, only bark carved into impossible shapes. The branches didn't sway, they trembled. The air smelled like wet copper, and citrus dot. Each tree had something nailed to it. Photographs, documents, drawings, people. Not literally memories of people. And every one of them had my mother's face. Slightly different, younger, older, smiling, screaming, head tilted just wrong. This wasn't a grove. It was an orchard of failed lives. A figure moved ahead. Not Amara, not Carol. It was tall, cloaked, its robe dragged across the stone and tree roots. Whispering, I didn't run, I didn't speak. It turned toward me. Its face was blank, smooth, no eyes, no mouth. But I heard it. You've entered the root of memory. You are not here to escape. You are here to replace. The pit does not consume. It records. You are the update. It stepped aside. Behind it, a circle of stones, 7 on each. A body, desiccated, robed, mouths open, hands pressed to their chests, fingers pointed inward toward a pedestal. Upon it, a glass orb, cracked, black fluid pulsed within slow, like a dying heartbeat. I knew, without being told, that this was the remnant, the last living fragment of the original circle, or what used to be them. I step into the ring. They spoke not aloud, but through me. We tried to contain the deep speech. We encoded it, buried it, but meaning leaks. And when meaning leaks, reality thins. We became language, we became context. Now we are a syntax without a speaker. You are the mouthpiece. I touched the orb. Pain shot up my arm, not physical, but semantic. Words I didn't know I'd forgotten bloomed in my skull. Sounds older than vowels. Thoughts not mine, but shaped like mine. I saw the pit before it was sealed. A village built around it. Slavic, pagan, desperate. I saw my ancestor, not a priest, but a lexicon keeper, branded with symbols, tasked with teaching children a language no one should speak. I saw him fail, and the pit open, and the first archivist pulled screaming into it, begging for silence as the walls bent with laughter. I dropped the orb, it shattered, and the remnant screamed. The cloaked figure seized, body convulsing as if pulled by invisible strings. The trees groaned, the ground boiled, and then it stopped. Everything went still. The trees fell silent. The orb was gone. In its place, a handprint burned into the floor, and at the grove's edge Amara, naked, eyes blank, skin carved with every symbol I had seen in the archive. She spoke into voices. You passed the threshold. Now the archive will write through you. She handed me a page, blank, except for one phrase. You must forget yourself to close the story. Then she collapsed. I carried her back through the grove. The stairs were gone, the mirrors shattered. The walls peeled like pages in an old book, and I knew the only way out was through the rewrite. I had to become the archivist, not to feed it, but to seal it with memory, with my memory. That was the cost. Not sacrifice, substitution. The castle no longer obeyed geometry. Corridors opened into stairwells that climbed sideways. Windows looked into other rooms, some lit with gaslight, others with flickering CRT screens showing footage I never recorded. I passed a hallway that contained every version of me I had failed to become. The man who never left Nebraska, the one who became a priest, the one who never came to Hauska. Each watched me as I passed, each wept blood. Amara slept, wrapped in the coat of the first archivist. Her breathing was slow, measured, not hers. Something inside her ticked, like a metronome keeping time to a forgotten language. The blank page she'd given me had changed. Now it contained a single line: "You must write yourself false." I returned to my room, if it still was that. The crucifix was back on the wall, inverted again, but this time it had eyes. I sat at the desk. There was ink, there was a pen made of bone, and in my head the archive began to dictate. Not in words and memories, but they were not mine. First, I wrote the false childhood. Born in Brno, 1990, raised in silence, parents unknown, language emerged in sleep, dreamed in Latin at age 4, spoke Akkadian in fever delirium, confined at 7, studied through glass, named Elias because it resembled a sound he could not forget. Then the false education, educated by machines, memory extracted quarterly, no mentors, only corrections, taught to unlearn, then the false assignment, dispatched to Hauska not to translate, but to restore, words eaten by the pit. Archive demanded a body. He volunteered, or was chosen, or remembered choosing. Each line I wrote twisted something inside me. My hands shook. My real memories fought back, but with each stroke of the pen they faded like smoke fleeing a closed room. Amara stirred. She opened her eyes. They were white. She spoke in the dead voice again. "Continue. The pit is listening." I kept writing, now the false future. He remained, his body became language, bones into runes, blood into red ink, voice fractured into 72 dialects. He taught the pit to sleep, and so it did. I paused. I was shaking. I couldn't remember my mother's voice, couldn't recall the smell of our farmhouse, the sound of her singing over the sink, the feel of Nebraska dust between my teeth. I looked to Amara. She was no longer breathing, but her body still watched me. The final line. His name was never Elias. I signed it, not with my name, but with the spiral, the glyph, the mark. And as I pressed the pen down, the castle inhaled, everything collapsed. Walls folded, books screened, stone cracked and bled all. Time screamed backward and sideways. The pit laughed, the trees above wept ink. And beneath it all, silence. And then a door, plain wood, brass knob. No symbols, just a door. Amara's body crumbled. The page curled into ash. The archive stopped, whispering. I walked through the door. It opened into sky, blue sky, real wind. The scent of pine. I was outside Hauska, alone, naked, no scars, no glyphs, no memory, just a note in my hand. You passed. Don't come back, and I didn't, but sometimes in dreams. I see that false childhood, and I miss it. FOIN Seal Dossier 7Q93. Recovered by Agent Marcus Vale, Directorate for Paranormal Containment, DPC, March 8, 2027. Begin transcript. Audio log. Field Rec Velo 32, Hauska Castle, Czech Republic. Substructure Echo Chamber A. No sign of active presence. Structural entry intact, though warped. Interior geometry does not match schematics. We passed the same hallway for times. Light distortion is measurable recording static. Jumps. Audio drift. Finding books. Ink is wet but unreadable. Characters do not match any known alphabet. Some resemble sketches submitted by the Monroe team before blackout. One room, no windows, no doors. Inside, a chair, bones arranged in a spiral, burn marks insistent, with control, ritual fire. Something else, a journal. Pages are blank except for one recurring phrase he wrote himself shut. The team never found Monroe, only fragments. An audio recorder embedded in a root system 20 feet underground. Still warm. A bone pen inscribed with runes that bled when handled, and Amara Patel's ID card damp, aged. Bent found inside a wall that hadn't been opened in decades. But most disturbing was the voice-print anomaly. When engineers decoded residual echoes in the stone, a low-frequency pulse emerged, a wordless hum that still echoes at specific times, mostly around 3:17 a.m. When run through filters, it produces faint speech patterns. A male voice whispers, sometimes intelligible, ... born here, ... remember me differently, ... still writing, ... and most chilling, ... he passed. March 17th, 2027. Personal notes, Tim Vale. I've begun dreaming in a language I don't know. Symbols appear behind my eyes, spiral motifs, inverted crosses, a pit, a woman with no face, a forest of bone. Sometimes I see myself standing in a windowless room, carving words into my own chest. Sometimes I hear a name, Telias, other times Javedal. Sometimes I write, and the ink moves. I submitted my resignation today. I won't leave, though I can't. There's something beneath. It's not sleeping anymore, and someone must keep writing. The castle stands empty, not sealed, off limits, forgotten by most. But the ground below it hums, and on cold nights, if you put your ear to the stone, you might hear it. A pen scratching, a breath beneath language, a voice patiently waiting to be remembered again. Not with your name, but with yours rewritten,